First things first is I want to go over some important points to remember. At primary school, you would have learned 5 multiplied by 6 equals 30. When we study algebra in secondary school, this multiplication symbol causes an awful lot of trouble, and so hundreds of years ago, mathematicians decided to get rid of it really when we were talking about higher level maths, and so further maths. So how we say 5 multiplied by 6 now is we write 5 and in brackets 6 equals 30. Another way we can write it is we can say 5 in brackets times 6 in brackets equals 30. So it's really important to remember first years that whenever you see brackets, that means multiply. And we will kind of be leaving behind this notation altogether. So that's the first point I want to remind you of. The second point I want to talk to you about is when we're dealing with multiplication, we have a clear set of rules. And that is, if I am multiplying a minus multiplied by a minus, that becomes a plus. If I have a plus multiplied by a plus, that becomes a plus. If I have a minus multiplied by a plus, these signs are different and that becomes a minus. And if I have a plus multiplied by a minus, those signs are different and that becomes a minus. So when we're dealing with multiplication, we must remember these rules here. Okay, so in example 1 here, I have 3 questions and it asks me to simplify each of the following. So simplify means write them in a nicer way. I have 3x in brackets and 2 in brackets. And we now know that those brackets mean multiply. So what this question actually says is 3x multiplied by 2. And we're going to do this using box multiplication methods. So I'm going to draw a little box and I'm going to just colour in this top section here. And along the 3x, underneath it, I'm going to write side. And underneath the 2, I'm going to write top. So along the side here, I'm now going to write 3x. And up on top, I'm going to write 2. And just as we did when we were looking at box multiplication, we're now going to multiply these 2 together to get this answer here. So we have 2 multiplied by 3x, and the answer to that is 2 3x's, which gives me 6x. And that's my answer. Okay. We're now going to move on to the next example here, which is 4x multiplied by 3x. Now, I'm just going to go over here onto the side and I'm just going to chat to you really about when you multiply x's together. If I have an x plus an x, that gives me 2x. If I have an x multiplied by an x, the answer to that is x squared. If I have an x multiplied by an x multiplied by an x, the answer to that is x cubed. So it's an x to the power of 3. If I have an x multiplied by an x multiplied by an x multiplied by an x, the answer to that is x to the power of 4. So this is really important to remember. X multiplied by x is x squared. If it's x by x by x, that's x cubed. And if it's x by x by x by x, it's x to the power of 4. So knowing that information, I'm now going to do part 2 here, which is 4x multiplied by 3x. So again, I'm going to do my box multiplication. I'm going to fill in this little section here. I'm going to write side and top. And so on the side, I'm now going to write 4x. And on the top, I'm going to write 3x. And remember, I am multiplying. I'm going to multiply my numbers first of all. So 4 multiplied by 3 gives me 12. next I'm going to multiply my letters, and it's x multiplied by x, and x multiplied by x is x squared. So the answer to this question here is 12x squared. My third example here is 3x multiplied by 2xy. So again, I'm going to lay out my grid in the same way. I'm going to write side and top. Along the side, I'm going to write 3x. And along the top, I'm going to write 2xy. And I'm multiplying across diagonally. First things first, I'm going to multiply my numbers together. So 3 multiplied by 2 gives me 6. X multiplied by x gives me x squared. And the y is left here, so it's 6x squared y. That is my answer to that one there. So we'll go through them. The first one was 2 multiplied by 3x. So 2 times 3 is 6, and then you have your x on its own. 3 times 4 is 12, and you have x times x, which gives you x squared. 2 times 3 is 6, and x by x gives you x squared, and you have your y. The next example I want to look at is when you're multiplying and you're dealing with signs or different signs. So if we read this question here, the question says, simplify 2y bracket minus 4y. So it means 2y multiplied by minus 4y. So again, I'm going to write side underneath the 2y. And top underneath the minus 4y squared. And I'm going to do my box multiplication. So fill in my box here. So along the side I have 2y, and along the top I have minus 4y. So first things first, I'm going to check out the signs and see what will that work out as. So this is a plus 2y, and this is a minus 4y, and a plus by a minus give me a minus. So now I follow through the same steps. The numbers 2 by 4 gives me 8, and the last step is the letters. Y multiplied by y is the same as x multiplied by x. Y by y gives me y squared. The second example I have here is minus 4z multiplied by minus 3z. And again, we're multiplying and we're dealing with signs, so those rules come back into effect. So draw my box multiplication. Side under the 4z and top under the minus 3z. Sorry, so that should have been side under the minus 4z and top under the minus 3z. So along the side I'm going to write minus 4z, and on top I'm going to have minus 3z. And we'll do the signs first. A minus multiplied by a minus gives me a plus. 4 multiplied by 3 gives me 12. And z multiplied by z gives me z squared. So the answer to this question here is plus 12z squared. Here we're asked to multiply out x squared by x cubed. When we're dealing with powers, we have a different method for multiplication, in the sense that if I was to write out what x squared actually meant, that meant x multiplied by x. If I was to write out what x cubed actually meant, that meant x multiplied by x multiplied by x. When we are multiplying things that have the same base but different powers, we can just add them. So the answer to this question here is x to the power of 5. And you know yourself that x by x by x by x by x is x to the power of 5. So when you're multiplying and you're dealing with things that have the same base, and I mean they have the same letter, x in both, you can just add the powers to get the answer. So we're going to look at one that's a little bit harder, but employs all of these ideas. Okay, so our second example here is minus 3x squared multiplied by minus 4x cubed. So again, we follow the same route in that we draw our box, fill in the top square here. Underneath minus 3x squared, we're going to write side. And underneath minus 4x cubed, we're going to write top. And I have minus 3x squared here and minus 4x cubed here. And we're going to take it in stages. First things first, we're multiplying. Remember, this is all multiplying. Minus by a minus gives me a plus. 3 multiplied by 4 gives me 12. And x squared multiplied by x cubed. Remember, when I'm dealing with powers, I can just add them if they've got the same base. So that's going to give me x squared by x cubed gives me x to the power of 5. So my answer here in total is 12x to the power of 5. Okay, next I want to look at if I'm asked to multiply out 3 terms. So I'm going to show you an example of this question. Okay, and the example we have today is 3y multiplied by minus 2y multiplied by x. And we're going to do this using the box multiplication. But the first thing we're going to do is we're just going to multiply the first 2 here. And I'm going to forget about the x and I'm going to do that at the end. So we have our box here. We have side under 3y. We have top under minus 2y. And I'll fill it in. 3y here, minus 2y here. So again, we multiply. I have a plus by a minus, gives me a minus. 3 multiplied by 2 gives me 6. And y multiplied by y gives me y squared. So when the first 2 are multiplied, we get minus 6y squared. I'm now going to multiply minus 6y squared by the last remaining term, which is x. So what we did was we multiplied these 2 out, and now we're going to use our answer and multiply it by this. So again, side and top. Minus 6y squared here, and x. And you can write 1x there to help you. So let's multiply. We have a minus by a plus, and a minus by a plus gives me a minus. We have 6 multiplied by 1, which is just 6. And we have y squared multiplied by x. And so that will just give me y squared x. And so the answer to this question here, when you're multiplying 3 terms, is minus 6y squared x. Okay, the learning check is 5 sums. Each sum is asking you to do box multiplication, multiply out the following. Another way you'll know it's multiplication is you can see all the brackets around.